The testing facility on Station Omega-7 was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. The sterile white corridors seemed to stretch forever, filled with scientists and military officials from dozens of species. Word of her abilities had spread throughout the Galactic Defense Corps. And now everyone wanted answers. Dr. Yithmara, a brilliant Nexari crystalline being whose geometric form pulsed with analytical energy, led the investigation. Her species had spent millennia perfecting the science of ballistics and atmospheric physics. If anyone could understand Elena's abilities, it would be her. Subject exhibits no technological enhancements. Dr. Yithmara announced to the assembled panel after 3 days of intensive testing. No psychic emanations detected. No genetic modifications beyond standard human parameters. Respiratory system appears entirely conventional. Admiral Korvex, a massive Ursek who commanded the Third Fleet, growled his frustration. Then how does she do it? We've had her breathing into every instrument we possess. We've analyzed her air intake, her metabolic processes, even the micro-movements of her diaphragm. There's nothing there that should allow for atmospheric sensing at the ranges she demonstrates. Elena sat in the center of the testing chamber, electrodes attached to various parts of her body, breathing monitors recording every inhalation. She had been patient with the tests, understanding that her abilities were as mysterious to her as they were to the scientists. But after days of being prodded and measured, she was beginning to feel more like a laboratory specimen than a student. Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly, suggested Commander Zaelvin. A void stalker whose own species possessed abilities that science couldn't fully explain. Some capabilities transcend conventional understanding. My people can phase between dimensions, yet we cannot explain the mechanism. We simply accept that it works. Dr. Yithmara's crystal form flickered with what Elena had learned to recognize as frustration. Dimensional phasing operates according to quantum principles we can at least theorize about. This human appears to be gathering atmospheric data through purely biological means that should not be capable of such precision. With respect, Doctor, Elena said quietly, speaking for the first time in hours, maybe you're making it more complicated than it is. The room fell silent. Elena could feel the attention of some of the most brilliant minds in the galaxy focused on her. Explain, Admiral Korvex commanded. Elena took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. When I was 7 years old, I lived with my grandmother in the mountains on Earth. She was born in a place called Tibet, where the air is thin and the weather changes quickly. She taught me to read the wind the same way she learned as a child. She paused, looking around the room at faces that ranged from skeptical to intensely curious. She said that every breath tells you a story about the world around you. The temperature tells you about pressure systems. The humidity speaks of distant rain. The way the air moves across your skin reveals the shape of the landscape ahead. Dr. Yithmara's form pulsed brighter. But the precision you demonstrate exceeds anything that simple observation could provide. Elena smiled slightly. Doctor, with respect, you're assuming that human observation is simple. She stood. Despite the protest of several technicians worried about the monitoring equipment, every species here has evolutionary advantages. The Krathri have compound eyes that process information faster than computers. The Zephyrians can manipulate electromagnetic fields. The Void Stalkers can phase between dimensions. She gestured around the room. But what evolutionary advantage do humans have? Several scientists began to speak at once, but Elena continued. We adapt. We learn, we take information that seems unrelated and find patterns that others miss. My grandmother spent 70 years reading the wind on one mountain. I've spent 15 years learning to apply those same principles across different worlds and atmospheric conditions. Commander Zaelvin leaned forward. You're suggesting this is learned rather than innate? Both, Elena replied. Humans have always been good at reading environmental cues for survival. But we're also good at improving techniques through practice. Every breath I take teaches me something new about atmospheric behavior. Admiral Korvex stood, his massive form imposing even in the large chamber. If what you're saying is true, then other humans could learn these techniques? Elena nodded. Given time, practice, and proper instruction, yes. The implications hit the room like a physical force. An entire species with the potential for supernatural accuracy and long-range combat would shift the balance of galactic military power dramatically. Dr. Ythmara S. crystal form was now pulsing so rapidly it was almost blinding. This changes everything. We would need to completely revise our understanding of human combat potential. More than that, Admiral Korvax said grimly. This makes humans a strategic resource. Every military power in the galaxy will want to recruit them, study them, or control them. Elena felt her heart sink. This was exactly what she had feared. She had just wanted to be a sniper, to use her skills in service of something greater than herself. Instead, she had accidentally turned her entire species into a military commodity. Sir, she said carefully, I'd like to make a request. Admiral Korvax turned his attention to her. Speak. Let me prove that human potential can serve the galaxy without being exploited by it. How? Elena looked around the room at the assembled scientists and military leaders. There's a situation developing in the Kepler sector, isn't there? Reports of insurgent activity that conventional forces haven't been able to handle? Several of the officials exchanged glances. The situation in the Kepler sector was classified, but Elena's security clearance had been elevated along with the interest in her abilities. The insurgents are using the asteroid fields to hide their movements, Elena continued. The gravitational fluctuations and electromagnetic interference make conventional targeting impossible. Traditional sniper teams can't operate effectively in that environment? Admiral Korvax's eyes narrowed. What are you proposing? Let me go, alone. If I can resolve the situation using human capabilities, it proves that we're valuable allies, not resources to be harvested. If I fail, then you know the limitations of what we can do. The room erupted in discussion. The idea of sending a single human sniper to handle a situation that had stymied entire fleets seemed absurd to most of the assembled experts, but Instructor Kelvin, who had remained silent throughout the testing, finally spoke. She's right. Every eye turned to him. His reputation was such that his words carried enormous weight. The Kepler insurgents have adapted to every conventional approach we've tried. They've studied our tactics, our technology, our species' natural advantages. They know how Crathery compound eyes track targets, how Zephyrian electromagnetic manipulation works, how Void Stalker phasing can be detected. He stood, his forearms crossed in front of him, but they've never faced a human wind reader. 3 days later, Elena found herself aboard a stealth transport heading toward the Kepler sector. The ship's crew gave her a wide berth, having heard stories about her abilities that had grown in the telling. Some believed she was psychic. Others thought she was some kind of technological hybrid. A few whispered that humans had made a pact with forces beyond normal. Understanding, Elena ignored the speculation and focused on studying the atmospheric data from the asteroid fields. Each asteroid created its own gravitational microenvironment, causing air currents to behave in ways that defied conventional physics. It would be like trying to read the wind inside a three-dimensional maze that changed constantly. The mission briefing had been straightforward. The insurgent leader, a rogue Crathery named Vector, had established a hidden base somewhere in the Titan asteroid field. From there, he was coordinating attacks on supply convoys and military installations. Traditional forces couldn't locate the base due to the electromagnetic interference, and when they did manage to track insurgent movements, the chaotic atmospheric conditions made accurate engagement impossible. Elena's job was simple in concept: find Vector and eliminate him. The insurgent movement would collapse without its charismatic leader. In practice, it meant navigating an environment where atmospheric conditions changed every few seconds, where gravitational anomalies could throw off calculations, and where the target would be actively trying to avoid detection while surrounded by natural camouflage. As the transport approached the asteroid field, Elena began her breathing exercises. But this time, something was different. The patterns she sensed were unlike anything she had encountered before. The asteroid field wasn't just creating chaotic air currents. It was creating a kind of atmospheric symphony, with each rock contributing its own note to a larger composition. Beginning deployment in 30 minutes, the pilot announced. Environmental conditions in the target zone are unprecedented. Elena nodded but didn't respond. She was too busy listening to what the wind was telling her about the asteroid field ahead. The gravitational interactions between the rocks created pressure waves that moved through the sparse atmosphere like ripples on a pond. By reading those ripples, she could map the field's structure in her mind. More importantly, she could detect anomalies. Places where the natural patterns were disrupted by artificial structures or energy. The Advanced Sniper Academy of the Galactic Defense Corps sat like a metallic jewel on the harsh surface of Ragnar's world, a planet specifically chosen for its hostile environment. If you could learn to shoot accurately here, the instructors claimed, you could shoot accurately anywhere in the galaxy. Elena had been at the academy for 3 months now, and the initial shock of her acceptance had given way to a more complex mixture of curiosity and skepticism from her fellow trainees. The other species represented the absolute elite of their respective worlds. Beings who had trained from childhood for this opportunity. There was Thexara, a void stalker whose natural camouflage abilities made her nearly invisible even to advanced sensors. Her homeworld's predators could phase between dimensions, making precision shooting a matter of survival from an early age. Next to her stood Korath, a Zephyrian whose electromagnetic manipulation allowed him to curve projectiles mid-flight and compensate for atmospheric interference. His people had mastered energy-based warfare millennia before humans had discovered gunpowder. The Krathari contingent included Vostak, whose forearms provided stability that human physiology could never match. His compound eyes could process visual information across a broader spectrum than most computer systems. And then there were the others, the crystalline Nexari, who could calculate ballistic trajectories with mathematical perfection. The gaseous ethereals who understood atmospheric dynamics better than any other known species. Each of them possessed natural advantages that made Elena's presence seem almost like a cosmic joke. Still don't understand why they let the humans stay, Vostak muttered as they prepared for the day's exercise. Novelty can only carry you so far. Elena, as had become her habit, said nothing. She sat quietly in her corner of the equipment room, breathing in her measured pattern while the others prepared their gear. Her rifle remained the same simple, almost primitive weapon she had carried from the beginning. While others used targeting computers and atmospheric processors, Elena relied on what the instructors had begun calling biological wind reading. Instructor Kelvin entered the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. Over the past months, he had watched Elena with growing interest, though he kept his observations to himself. Today, however, something was different about his demeanor. Today's exercise will test your abilities under combat conditions, he announced. You will be divided into teams of 2. 1 shooter, 1 spotter. Your target will be mobile, defended, and actively trying to avoid detection. The advanced students exchanged glances. Combat scenarios were rare in the academy, reserved for final evaluations or special circumstances. This was unexpected. Furthermore, Kelvin continued, the exercise will take place during a Class 3 atmospheric storm. Wind speeds will exceed 200 kilometers per hour, with rapid pressure changes and visibility reduced to near zero. Several students shifted uncomfortably. Class 3 storms were considered too dangerous for normal training operations. The atmospheric chaos they created made accurate shooting nearly impossible, even for the most advanced targeting systems. Your mission, the instructor continued, is to eliminate a single target that will be moving through the Titan Canyon system. The target will be defended by automated systems designed to detect and neutralize incoming threats. You will have 1 shot. Miss, and your position will be compromised. Take too long to acquire the target, and it will escape beyond effective range. Elena felt her heart rate increase slightly, but her breathing remained steady. Around her, the other students were checking their equipment with renewed urgency. This wasn't just an exercise anymore. It was a test that could determine their future in the program. Team assignments, Kelvin announced, consulting a datapad. Nexara and Korath. Vostok and Nexara Unit 7, Elena Vasquez. He paused, and Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Elena Vasquez will work alone. The silence was immediate and profound. Working without a spotter was considered suicide in advanced sniper operations. The spotter's job was to calculate wind, range, and atmospheric conditions while the shooter focused on target acquisition. No one, regardless of species or natural advantages, attempted solo operations under these conditions. Sir, Vostok said carefully, perhaps there was an error in the assignments? Kelvin's mandibles clicked once. No error. Elena Vasquez requested to work alone. I granted her request. Elena felt the stares intensify. She had indeed requested solo operation, though she hadn't expected it to be announced so publicly. The truth was, she found that having a spotter actually interfered with her wind-reading abilities. The atmospheric information they provided often contradicted what her breathing told her, creating confusion at critical moments. But that's impossible, Nexara said. Even our best graduates use spotters. The atmospheric calculations alone require constant monitoring and adjustment. Perhaps, Kelvin said mildly. Elena Vasquez has a different approach to atmospheric calculations. An hour later, the teams were positioned throughout the Titan Canyon system. The storm had arrived with devastating force, turning the sky into a churning mass of clouds and debris. Visibility dropped to mere meters, and the wind howled through the canyon with a voice that seemed almost alive. Elena crouched on a ridge overlooking the primary transit route, her rifle positioned and ready. Unlike the other teams, she had no weather monitoring equipment, no atmospheric processors, no electromagnetic field detectors. She had her breathing, her rifle, and her trained intuition. The storm raged around her with incredible violence. Lesser beings would have been thrown from their positions by the wind alone, but Elena remained still, breathing in her measured pattern, gathering information from each inhalation. Through her breathing, she began to map the storm's structure. The chaos that seemed random to instruments and other observers revealed patterns to her trained senses. The storm was like a living thing, with rhythms and flows that followed rules more ancient than technology. She breathed in, and sensed a pressure drop coming from the east. The wind would shift in approximately 40 seconds, creating a brief window where the cross-currents would align. She breathed out and felt the electromagnetic disturbances that Korath's people could manipulate, but which she simply had to work around. Her comm system crackled with reports from the other teams. Team 2 in position. Atmospheric readings are completely chaotic. Unable to establish reliable firing solution. Team 3 has visual contact with target approach, but wind shear is making tracking impossible. Requesting permission to relocate. Team 1 cannot maintain position. Visibility 0, winds exceeding safety parameters. Elena said nothing. She had learned that her fellow students viewed her reports with skepticism, so she had stopped making them. Instead, she focused on her breathing and waited for the moment she knew was coming. The target appeared exactly when her calculations predicted it would. A sleek transport craft moving through the canyon at high speed, following what its pilot thought was an unpredictable flight path. But Elena had been tracking its approach for the past 10 minutes, reading the atmospheric disturbances it created long before it came into visual range. The craft was heavily shielded and defended by point defense systems that could destroy incoming projectiles. Its pilot was skilled, using the storm's chaos to mask the vehicle's signature and movement patterns. Under normal circumstances, hitting such a target would require a team of specialists with advanced equipment. Elena breathed in, processing information about wind speed, direction, pressure, humidity, and electromagnetic interference. She breathed out, calculating trajectory, timing, and target movement. The storm's voice told her everything she needed to know. The craft banked left, exactly as she had predicted. Its defensive systems were focused on threats from the most likely angles of attack, based on the positions where conventional snipers would have set up their equipment. But Elena wasn't conventional. and her position wouldn't make sense to tactical analysis programs. She fired. The shot left her rifle in the brief moment between one gust and the next, threading through layers of atmospheric disturbance that would have scattered any conventionally aimed projectile. The bullet rode the storm's currents like a surfer riding a wave, using the very chaos that defeated other weapons as a guide to its target. The craft's defensive systems never detected the threat. The projectile struck the engine compartment with perfect precision, causing a controlled shutdown that brought the vehicle down safely in the designated landing zone. Elena's comm system exploded with chatter. Did you see that shot? Impossible targeting solution. The storm should have made that impossible. How did she even see the target through this weather? Instructor Kelvin's voice cut through the chatter. All teams returned to base. Exercise complete. The journey back to the academy took place in relative silence. Elena's fellow students kept glancing at her, but none seemed to know what to say. The shot they had witnessed defied their understanding of atmospheric physics and ballistic science. Upon their return, Kelvin called Elena to his office. The room was Spartan, decorated only with weapons from across the galaxy and commendations from conflicts that spanned centuries. Elena sat in the single chair facing his desk while the instructor. The recruitment station on Kepler 442b buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy gathered for the most prestigious military academy selection in known space. The Galactic Defense Corps only accepted the finest warriors from each species, and today would determine who earned the right to train at their legendary sniper academy. Sergeant Major Vexhai, a towering Krathri with 4 arms and compound eyes that could spot movement from impossible distances, surveyed the candidates with obvious disdain. His race had dominated long-range combat for centuries, their natural advantages making them the undisputed masters of precision shooting across the galaxy. Another pathetic group, he muttered to his aide. Lieutenant Zos, a serpentine Naga whose heat-sensing abilities made him perfect for tracking targets. Look at them. Soft creatures thinking they can compete with real predators. Among the crowd of applicants stood beings that struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. The Ursic, massive bear-like creatures whose strength could crush steel. The Zephyrians, with their natural ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields. The Void Stalkers, who could become nearly invisible by bending light around their bodies. Each species brought advantages that had served them well in countless conflicts. And then there was Elena Vasquez. She stood barely 5.5 feet tall, her brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her equipment looked almost primitive compared to the advanced targeting systems and bio-enhanced gear surrounding her, while other candidates wore powered armor or carried weapons that hummed with energy. Elena held an old-fashioned rifle that seemed almost antique by galactic standards. The Krathari recruits pointed at her and clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. A human? One said. They sent a human to sniper school? Probably doesn't even know which end of the rifle to hold. Another added, causing more chittering laughter. Elena ignored them, standing quietly with her eyes closed. Her chest rose and fell in slow, measured breaths. To the watching aliens, it looked like she was meditating or perhaps praying to whatever primitive gods humans still believed in. Some of the more advanced species had long ago abandoned such primitive practices. Candidates' attention. Vexhai's voice boomed across the training ground. Today you will prove whether you deserve to call yourselves snipers. The test is simple. You see that target at 2,000 meters? He gestured with one of his 4 arms toward a distant mountain peak where a small metallic disk gleamed in the afternoon sun. 2,000 meters. The distance alone would eliminate most species. Even among those present, few could manage accurate shots at such range under ideal conditions. But these were not ideal conditions. The wind on Kepler 442b was notorious among military circles. The planet's unusual atmospheric composition and magnetic field created wind patterns that seemed to follow no logical rules. Gusts could shift direction in milliseconds, creating invisible barriers that could throw even the most perfectly aimed shot completely off target. You have 3 shots each, Vexhai continued. Hit the target, and you advance to the next round. Miss all three, and you go home to whatever backwater world spawned you. The candidates began setting up their equipment. The Zephyrians deployed complex weather monitoring stations that could analyze air currents down to the molecular level. The Void Stalkers used their natural abilities to phase partially out of reality, hoping to fire from a dimension where wind had less effect. The Crathuri relied on their compound eyes and lightning-fast reflexes to compensate for any environmental factors. Elena simply sat down cross-legged behind her rifle, closed her eyes, and continued her measured breathing. The first candidate, a massive Ursik named Grozek, stepped to the firing line. His rifle was nearly as large as Elena herself, designed to deliver devastating firepower at extreme range. He fired 3 shots in quick succession, each one accompanied by a thunderous boom that echoed across the valley. All 3 shots missed, scattered by wind currents that seemed to come from nowhere. One by one, the candidates tried and failed. The Zephyrian's molecular analysis was thrown off by magnetic interference. The Void Stalker's interdimensional approach only made the wind effects more unpredictable. Even the supposedly superior Crathuri found their multi-arm stability advantage useless against the chaotic atmospheric conditions. Finally, Elena's turn arrived. She walked to the firing line with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout the day. The other candidates, frustrated by their failures, watched with mixtures of curiosity and barely concealed mockery. "Look at the human," one whispered, still doing her breathing exercises like some kind of meditation. "Ritual? Primitive species always cling to superstitions when facing superior opponents," another replied. Elena positioned herself behind her rifle, but didn't immediately look through the scope. Instead, she continued her breathing pattern, but now something was different. Her chest movements weren't random or meditative. They followed a specific rhythm, almost like she was counting something. She breathed in for exactly 4 seconds, held for 2, then exhaled for 6 seconds. The pattern never varied. In, hold out, in, hold out. "What is she doing?" Lieutenant Zoss asked his superior. Genuine curiosity replacing his earlier disdain, Vexhai didn't answer immediately. Something about the human's behavior was nagging at him. He had seen thousands of candidates over the years, representatives from hundreds of species. He knew desperation, he knew fear, he knew overconfidence. But this was something else entirely. Elena's breathing continued, steady and rhythmic. But as she breathed, something remarkable began to happen. Her body swayed almost imperceptibly, moving in tiny adjustments that seemed to follow no pattern the watching aliens could understand. The wind gusted across the valley, sending dust devils spinning in chaotic spirals. The target, 2 kilometers away, wavered in the heat shimmer like a mirage. Atmospheric pressure readings jumped wildly on the Zephyrian instruments, and still Elena breathed. "She's been doing that for 5 minutes, Grozek rumbled. "Is she planning to shoot today or tomorrow?" More laughter rippled through the crowd of failed candidates. Even some of the instructors began to show impatience. This human was turning their rigorous selection process into a meditation session, but Sergeant Major Vexhai found himself studying Elena more closely. There was something about her breathing pattern that reminded him of something, though he couldn't place what. The rhythm was too precise, too purposeful to be simple nervousness or primitive ritual. Elena finally opened her eyes and looked through her rifle scope. But even then, she didn't take the shot. She continued breathing, continued making those tiny positional adjustments. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, but she showed no urgency to fire. The wind shifted, a powerful gust that bent the sparse vegetation and sent small rocks tumbling down the mountainside. Elena's body moved with it, a subtle lean that seemed to anticipate the change rather than react to it. "Sergeant Major," Lieutenant Zoss said quietly, "permission to speak?" "Granted. I'm starting to think she's not meditating at all, sir." Vexhai's compound eyes focused more intently on the human candidate. Zoss was right. This wasn't meditation or religious ritual or nervous delay. Elena's breathing had a purpose, and that purpose was becoming clearer with each passing moment. Another wind gust, this one from a completely different direction. Again, Elena's position shifted slightly before the change was visible to anyone else. Her breathing pattern remained constant, but somehow she was using it to predict or sense changes in air current that their most sophisticated instruments couldn't detect. "Impossible," whispered one of the Crothery instructors. "No biological organism can sense atmospheric pressure changes that subtle." But as they watched, Elena continued to demonstrate exactly that ability. Each breath seemed to give her information about the air around her, creating a three-dimensional map of wind patterns that existed only in her mind. The other candidates had stopped laughing. Even the most arrogant among them could recognize when they were witnessing something extraordinary, even if they didn't understand what it was. Elena took her first shot. The rifle's report was surprisingly quiet compared to the thunderous weapons the other candidates had used. There was no dramatic recoil, no impressive display of power, just a simple, efficient discharge that sent a single projectile arcing across 2 kilometers of chaotic atmosphere. The shot struck the target dead. Center. Silence fell over the training ground. The only sound was the wind that had defeated every other candidate, the same wind that Elena had somehow read like a book, written in invisible ink. She chambered another round and continued breathing. The wind patterns were changing, shifting into a configuration that the monitoring instruments registered as completely unstable. Cross-currents that should have made accurate shooting impossible. Elena fired again. Another perfect hit. The silence stretched longer. Some of the aliens were checking their equipment, certain that their sensors must be malfunctioning. Others stared at Elena with expressions ranging from confusion to something approaching awe for her third shot. Elena made no adjustment at all. She simply breathed, waited, and fired when her internal calculations told her the moment was right. 3 perfect shots. 3 impossible hits through conditions that had deaf.